Era. Starting from a small mountain village in the south. Introduction. www.zhaoshuyuan.com. In my life, I fell for someone else's trap and took a wrong path, leading to my wife's depression and death, and my children's separation. After a lifetime of rebirth, Qingshan decided to change his ways, compensate his wife and children well, and lead the whole family to live a good life. Backed by the mountains, growing chestnuts, picking tea, and growing peaches, my family has enough food and clothing. Reviving the past craftsmanship and weaving bamboo baskets into craftsmanship. https://www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Chapter 1. Qingshan, your wife has been bullied. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Qingshan sat up from the bed with a buzzing head. The headache caused by the hangover made him pound his head. The whispers of the two women outside the window did not stop, but instead, there was an increasingly fierce battle. He looked at the decorations inside the house and couldn't figure it out. Didn't he return to the old house on the day of his wife's death, drink too much, and fall to death? How did you wake up and go straight back to 1986? He suddenly went back from his 60s to his 30s, feeling as if he had been hit by a pie falling from the sky. He was pleasantly surprised and couldn't speak for a while. He stared at the calendar on the wall for a long time, finally feeling a bit realistic. Just as he was about to get out of bed, he heard an angry female voice suddenly coming from outside. Anyway, there's no such man. His wife has been bullied and he's still sleeping and drinking here. Why don't he drink to death? Forget it. After speaking, the door of his room was slammed by someone. He recognized the voice of his wife's cousin Lu Meiwan and quickly walked over to open the door. The woman rushed in quickly and angrily pointed at him. Qingshan, your wife has been bullied. Do you mind or don't you care? Thinking of his wife and the debt he owed her in his previous life, Qingshan's face showed eagerness. What's wrong with her? Lu Meiwan didn't expect this reaction from him, she just reacted immediately. She had just come down from the mountain to pick tea, but was deceived by a tea dealer. Unable to get angry, she argued with him and ended up breaking her knee on his bike. Without considering anything else, Qingshan quickly ran towards the tea mountain. Along the way, he was thinking about the debt he owed his wife in the previous life, because he didn't understand people clearly and lost all his property. His wife had suffered all the grievances and exhaustion during the decades she married him, and never had a good day. He ran faster and faster, and soon ran to the foot of the mountain. Sure enough, he saw his wife and tea dealer surrounded by everyone. He quickly pushed away the crowd and walked to her side. Lin Mei. The woman turned around, with anger and grievances hidden in her eyes. Seeing his wife again, who was still so young and lively, Qingshan only wanted to thank heaven for giving him a chance to make up for the regrets of the previous life. He reached out and helped her up, and indeed saw that her knee was skinned and swollen. His face suddenly darkened, and everyone around him was startled by his appearance. After all, he is usually unpredictable, and even when he gets drunk, he often fights with people. But at this moment, he patiently asked the woman beside him, "You say, how did he deceive you?" "My wife has a gentle personality and rarely gets red-faced with others. If I could make her so angry, this tea dealer must have done something very outrageous." Lin Mei didn't expect that he was here to support her. Although he wasn't used to it, she decided to trust him again. "I picked a silver needle, but he even calculated it based on Longjing's price. The price difference between these two is exactly double." The tea dealer was surrounded and couldn't leave. At this moment, when he saw the man from her family coming again, his heart felt a bit uneasy. However, he still choked his neck and shouted, "You can't just keep your eyes open and talk nonsense. What you gave me is clearly Longjing, with leaves." Lin Mei suddenly became anxious. She pointed to a cloth bag on his bicycle and said, "You're talking nonsense. What I gave you was a silver needle, and I saw you pour it in with my own eyes. If you don't believe me, open it and show it to the big guy. The villagers also began to coax, yes, if you're not feeling guilty, just open it for us to see. Lin Mei is a well-known honest person in the village, but unfortunately, she has a husband who is a jerk. She is pulling her 2 children alone, which is not to mention how hard it is. Therefore, when the villagers see her in difficulties, they will always help her. The commotion grew louder and louder, and the tea dealer was forced into a corner. Perhaps knowing that he couldn't escape, he had to open his cloth bag. Everyone immediately became angry upon seeing it. Isn't this just a silver needle? You bully a woman, what kind of man can you be? At this moment, Qingshan pulled the cloth bag and the tea vendor over together. He was tall and strong, and this pull almost knocked over his bicycle. Either I'll take you to the police station, or you can make up for the shortfall and choose one. The tea dealer was as thin as a monkey, no match for him, and quickly raised his hand to surrender. I'll make up. After speaking, he took out 3 dimes from his shoulder bag and stuffed them into Lin Mei's hand. Here you go, okay. Qingshan still held on to him and looked down at his wife. Is that right? Lin Mei nodded and was about to let him go when she saw him looking at him again. Now that the money for tea has been replenished, let's talk about you hitting my wife. The tea vendor's face turned pale. Don't talk nonsense, I hit her somewhere. She came to chase my car herself and fell down. Qingshan reached out and clenched his collar tightly. I advise you to think carefully before speaking, he said. The people around also complained for Lin Mei. Anyway, if you hurt someone, you'll have to pay for their medical expenses. The tea dealer dared not speak hard at the sight of the situation, so he could only hold his breath and took out 50 cents from his shoulder bag. That's enough. Qingshan looked at his wife and saw her nod at him. He just loosened his clothes, but his eyes were still fierce. In the future, let me know that you bullied her again. I see you hitting you every time, remember. The tea dealer quickly nodded and then pushed his bicycle away. The people around him also left at this moment, but before leaving, they couldn't help but glance at Qingshan, not understanding why he suddenly seemed to have changed people. At this moment, Lin Mei also pushed him away and wanted to leave on her own. However, he picked him up and she quickly pushed him, but his arm was as hard as steel, and she couldn't push it away no matter how hard it was. Let me down. Wangshan didn't listen, just carried her all the way to the barefoot doctor's house in the village. At this moment, a childish shout suddenly came from behind them. Mom! Lin Mei quickly pushed him, but when she saw him still holding on, she jumped off his back. Wangshan realized that it was his son who came with his brother-in-law. He looked at his son in front of him and remembered the look of his rejection and hatred towards him in the previous life. His heart tightened and he lifted his leg and walked towards him. Xiaoshan. The boy quickly bypassed him and ran to Lin Mei. Mom, are you okay? Where are the people bullying you? Lin Mei shook her head and looked at her younger brother not far away. Why did you come over? Aren't your family busy? Lin Song glanced at her knee and said, Sister, I'll take you to the clinic. Qingshan saw that he had completely ignored himself and walked forward. I'll take your sister to see a doctor. Our family is busy, so you can go back first. Lin Song looked at him with a disdainful expression on his face and said, You're the only one. If you don't give my sister a hard time, I'll be fine. How dare I count on you? Lin Mei tugged at his arm and said, Xiaosong, the money that the tea dealer gave me today was what your brother-in-law wanted back. He even helped me recover my medical expenses. Lin Song had an incredulous expression on his face, only to see his sister constantly winking at him before continuing to mock him. Then you have to take my sister to treat the injury, Xiaoshan. Follow your mother and come to me anytime if you have anything to do. The boy looked up and said, I know, uncle. Chapter 2. It's time to divide this family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Lin Song left, Su Qingshan inexplicably picked up his wife and strode towards the barefoot doctor's house. Su Shan kept following behind them, looking at him with a wary expression. When he arrived at the barefoot doctor's house, he asked him to help his wife treat her wound and then took her back. When he returned home, it was already noon. As soon as he put down his wife, he heard a burst of crying coming from inside the house. He recognized that it was his daughter Sun Yan's voice and walked in quickly. He saw her lying naked on the bed at the moment, without even covering herself with a blanket, and her crying face turned red. Although spring has already begun, the temperature is still very low, let alone my daughter, who is only 3 years old now, how can she withstand the cold? He remembered that his daughter was usually entrusted to his mother to take care of, and now he didn't know where she had gone, leaving her here alone and ignoring her. He was about to walk over when he saw his wife rushing over and picking her up. Su Shan quickly ran over with a blanket, and Lin Mei tightly wrapped her daughter's body in the blanket. Looking at her pitiful appearance, her eyes quickly turned red. Su Qingshan also panicked when he saw the situation, and quickly approached to comfort him, only to see her turn her head and glare at him angrily. Su Qingshan, go ask your mother, Nian, is she her own granddaughter? How could she be so abusive? She's only 3 years old. As soon as she finished speaking, Su's mother came in from outside. She walked over calmly with Sun Yan's clothes in her hand, and then threw them onto the bed. Put it on for her. This girl is really good. She insists on running to the river to play in such weather, and accidentally falls into it. If it weren't for my quick movements, she might have died a little. Mom. No matter how good Lin Mei's temper was, she couldn't bear to see her daughter being treated like this. Remember that she is your own granddaughter, even if you don't like her anymore, you shouldn't insult her like this. Su's mother seemed to have lost sight of the anger on her face. A little girl can't be so precious in a movie. Besides, I brought her clothes and didn't freeze her, she said. Su Qingshan watched his wife's chest constantly rise and fall in anger, and also understood how serious his mother's preference for sons over daughters was. He gave her a wink and asked her not to say anything. Lin Mei thought that he was going to stand on his mother's side again, and her eyes were full of disappointment. Su Shan also walked up at this moment, looking angry and saying, "Grandma, you shouldn't treat your sister like this." Su's mother saw him, but she bent down with a smile. "Oh, my good grandson, Grandma has sugar to eat here." After speaking, she was about to touch her pocket, but he pushed her with his hand. "I don't want your candy, you're not good to your sister, you're a bad person." Su's mother's smile froze and turned fierce. She looked at the woman on the bed and took 2 steps closer to her. "You taught me to be a good grandson, didn't you?" Lin Mei was about to refute when Su Qingshan stepped forward and pulled her away. "Mom, Xiao Shan is right. Nian is still so small. You should have had more dim sum. How could you let her go to the river?" Su's mother slapped her thighs when she saw that even her son was blaming her. "Oh, it's really unreasonable. I pooped and peed and pulled you up. That's how you treated me. His father, I can't live anymore. Take me away." After speaking, she sat on the ground and began to cry loudly. Su Qingshan, for the first time, did not go to pull her, let alone speak softly. Mothers have always been dominant and have a serious preference for sons over daughters. They don't treat their wives well, even their daughters are not favored at all. Once upon a time, he thought about his mother losing her husband in middle age. It was not easy for him to pull his brothers up alone, so he always forgave, which also caused his wife and daughter too much injustice. Thinking of his debt to them, he realized that he couldn't continue like this. He let her cry and fuss for a while until she finally calmed down before walking towards her. "Mom, Lin Mei is my wife. You can't fuss over her anymore. Nian is my daughter, and in my heart, she is the same as Xiao Shan. I hope you can also treat her better." Sue's mother saw that he didn't feel sorry for herself at all, so she spoke to her in such a tone and immediately pointed her finger at Lin Mei. She stood up and pointed at her, it's all you who taught Qingshan to disobey me, right? He never did this to me before. Lin Mei was also shocked by Su Qingshan's words just now. This was the first time he had stood on her side, speaking for her and her daughter. She was about to refute when she saw him walking up and pushing her out. Mom, go rest first. Nian Nian fell asleep, don't disturb her. Sue's mother became even more infuriated when she saw that her son only had a wife and daughter in his eyes, and there was no such thing as her old mother. I see you've been hooked by this fox spirit. It's okay, I don't care about anything in the future. You can take care of yourself, children. After speaking, she angrily left. Su Qingshan returned to his room and looked at his wife and son. I'm hungry, I'll go cook. At this moment, Su Shan's vigilance in his eyes faded and he just looked at him with an incredulous expression. Are you really Dad? Su Qingshan smiled and reached out to touch his head. Let's give our mom and sister a good rest. Can you help Dad set fire? Su Shan turned around to look at his sister and loudly agreed. Okay. Su Qingshan took him to the kitchen and found that there were very few things inside. The rice in the rice jar has reached its bottom, and there is only a handful of vegetables and a few potatoes on the stove. He thought of his wife and children all looking yellow and skinny, and remembered that all the money at home was being held by his mother. Zhaoshuyuan.com. This is not a solution. He has finally regained his life and cannot let them suffer with him anymore. It's time to divide this family. He calmly cooked the rice, stir-fried the vegetables and potatoes, and then asked Xiaoshan to call for them to eat. At the dinner table, he looked at his children wolfing down, feeling uneasy in his heart. He looked at his silent wife beside him, feeling guilty. Lin Mei, I will go find my mom and get our money back. In the future, we will entrust you to take care of our family. Lin Mei looked up at him, her eyes filled with shock. You really? It's not that she's making a fuss, it's just that Su Qingshan has changed too much. Did you suddenly wake up after drinking too much last night? Su Qingshan looked at her appearance and reached out to grab her hand. In the past, I was sorry for you and my children. From now on, the task of supporting the family will be entrusted to me. You don't have to be so tired anymore. I won't drink alcohol anymore, and we'll live a good life together. Su Shan, who had been desperately digging into his mouth for food, also stopped at this moment, his mouth open as if it could fit an egg. Is this really his father? Su Qingshan looked at him at this moment and said, let your mother rest at home in the afternoon. Follow your father to the field to pick up potatoes. In the evening, we will go to the town to buy some rice, noodles, and oil. Our family must have a full stomach. Su Shan was extremely happy and nodded vigorously. He quickly finished the dishes in his bowl and stood up. I'm full. Su Qingshan touched his head and stood up. Take the hoe and basket, let's go. Let's go. Chapter 3. Successful Separation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Soon, Su Qingshan came to the field with his son. His wife was always taking care of this piece of land, and the potatoes were growing well. He remembered her hard-working appearance and felt a surge of guilt in his heart. He handed the basket to his son and asked him to follow behind him to pick up potatoes. You have to look carefully, you can't miss a single one, do you know? Su Shan looked at his father in front of him, his heart full of fighting spirit. Ensure completion of the task. Su Qingshan dared not delay his time and immediately began digging potatoes. His movements were fast, and Su Shan quickly picked them up behind him, but still couldn't make it in time. After he finished digging, he followed him to pick up the whole 2 big baskets before planning to go home. Su Shan was very happy all the way. He closely followed Su Qingshan and as he was about to get home, he suddenly grabbed his sleeve. "Dad, you won't change back, will you?" Qingshan couldn't bear to cry or laugh, but more importantly, he still felt guilty. He used to be such a jerk, he will never be again from now on. He touched his head and said, "Don't worry, in the future, our family will be supported by my father. I will work hard to earn money, so that you can live a good life and have enough to eat every day." Su Shan nodded desperately, looking at him as he finally lost his previous defenses. At this moment, they walked to the small stream at their doorstep, and Qingshan saw Su's mother chatting with several aunts. Her expression still looked very angry. "I think she hasn't calmed down yet." And as soon as he appeared, his aunt stopped him. "Qingshan, it's not easy for your mother to pull your brothers to grow up alone. You dare not make her sad." Yes, your mother is not easy. How hard did she endure in the past to raise you all?" Qingshan can guess how much she has added fuel and vinegar, but this is not the time to argue. "Aunties, I have a clear idea," he said with a humble expression immediately after. He turned his head to look at Su's mother. "Mom, let's go home. I have something to say to you." Upon hearing him say this, Su's mother thought he knew he was wrong and his expression improved a bit. A few aunts beside her also comforted her. "Qingshan knows she's wrong. Don't be angry, you mother.in.law. The whole family still needs to be good." Yes. Su's mother was satisfied and followed them back home. The house where Su's mother lives now is still the old house of the past, with poor lighting and a bit dark inside. Qingshan didn't bother with her either, he spoke directly. "Mom, I'm also 30 years old, and Xiaoshan and the others have all grown up. There are many places in our family where we need to use money. I thought to myself that in the future, we can manage our own money, and it would be easier for you to be old." Su's mother was momentarily stunned, and then her eyes widened. "What do you mean, you're splitting up?" At this moment, Qingshan's brother and younger brother also came in upon hearing the commotion, and Su's mother became even more noisy. She ran to Su's father's portrait and cried loudly. "His father, Qingshan's wings are hard now. He doesn't want me to be his mother anymore. He wants to split up with me. I can't live anymore. You can take me with you." After speaking, she was about to crash into the only square table in the room, but Su Wenliang quickly stopped her. "Second brother, what are you doing?" Boss Su Huigan also scolded him on the side. "This family is well taken care of by the mother. You have only been married for a few years, so your wings are hard now. Don't even want your mother anymore." Qingshan felt waves of pain as he watched the farce before him. But he knew that if he wanted his wife and children to live a better life, it was a necessary step. He looked at his elder brother, who was filled with indignation and scolded him, and said coldly, "Big brother, I remember you managed your own money the year you got married. Why did you come to me? You just don't want a mother anymore." Su Huigan's face turned white and he choked his neck, saying, "That's because your sister.in.law caused a lot of trouble, and I can't do anything about it. Besides, so Lin Mei's good temper deserves to be bullied." Upon hearing him say so, Su's mother became even more angry. "Second, you need to have a conscience when speaking. If you call her over, I need to ask clearly how I bullied her." Qingshan had long guessed that she wouldn't admit it, but he was already prepared. "After Lin Mei finished giving birth, you thought she gave birth to a daughter. She didn't even give birth, so you asked her to go to the small river to wash clothes. Also, didn't you take the chicken brought by her brother.in law?" Su's chest kept heaving with anger, and as she rolled her eyes, she almost fainted. Just as Su Wenliang was about to shout, Qingshan quickly walked up, and among the people who pressed her, she suddenly regained consciousness. He also knew he couldn't act too hastily, so he slowed down his tone. "Mom, I didn't come here today to settle old grudges with you, but it's all your daughter.in.law. Your attitude toward sister.in.law and Lin Mei is changing day by day, and Qingshan is going to elementary school in the second half of the year, so our family really needs money. Su's mother saw that he was determined today. Although his mouth was still howling, she didn't want to make such an unpleasant scene. She wiped away 2 tears with her hand and said, "Okay, you two despise me for being old and not being able to handle this family well. Then I'll give you everything. I don't care about anything in the future, there will always be a day when you beg me." After speaking, she walked towards the inner room, and Qingshan looked at her back without following her. In no time, she came out with a stack of tickets in her hand. "Your money is all here, take it and take it." Although Qingshan has been careless in recent years and hasn't taken much care of the family's affairs, Lin Meichin is diligent and quick. In addition to farming, she often picks tea leaves and makes clothes for people to earn money. Her savings are definitely more than that. But considering his mother's nurturing kindness, as well as his strength and carpentry skills, he doesn't worry about not making money. So he left with the money. After returning home, he saw Lin Mei anxiously walking back and forth in the hall. Seeing him return, she immediately walked towards him. "What happened? Why did you argue so fiercely with Mom?" Qingshan shook his head and handed her all the money, leaving only the money for today's shopping. Lin Mei didn't expect him to really get the money back. Although it was obviously less, at least he didn't have to ask for it every time. Qingshan called Su Shan and said, "It's still early. Xiaoshan and I went to the town to buy something to eat. I gave my mom half a basket of potatoes, and we kept the rest for ourselves to eat." Lin Mei nodded and said, "Be careful on the way." On the way out of the village, Su Shan kept running around Qingshan happily. "Dad, you're so amazing." Qingshan touched his head, thinking that there was still some way to go to town, so he decided to hold him on his shoulder. He was tall and walked quickly, and the two of them arrived in town in no time. Although Su Shan is young, he is very sensible and doesn't take the initiative to say he wants anything. Zhaohuiyuan.com Qingshan bought rice and noodles, and also bought a piece of pork lard, intending to take it back and boil it. Su Shan was extremely happy because having pig fat meant having pig fat residue to eat. As he walked, Qingshan saw a stall selling apples and went over to inquire about the price. 50 cents per kilogram, sweet and crispy. "Can I give the child 1 kilogram? When Su Shan saw the bright red apple, he swallowed his saliva but didn't speak. Qingshan heard his drooling and let him down. "You go pick a few." Su Shan was extremely happy, but he didn't dare to take more, so he carefully picked 4. "Dad, Mom, Sister, and me, we each have 1. Seeing him so sensible, Qingshan felt a bit uneasy in his heart, and at the same time, his desire to work hard to make money became increasingly strong. He didn't say anything and planned to take him away after paying, but Su Shan suddenly pulled him to a stall. "Dad, beautiful headband." Qingshan naturally understood his meaning. He wanted to buy it for his mother and sister. Thinking of his wife and daughter, he nodded and asked him to pick one for each of them, then prepared to take him back. The two of them had just arrived at the village entrance when a man suddenly walked towards them. Qingshan intended to turn a blind eye to him, but he didn't want him to stop him. "Qingshan, I heard my sister Law was bullied. Is she okay?" Qingshan looked at the face in front of him and thought of the various tricks he had deceived him in the previous life, which led him to fall deeper and deeper step by step, and finally regret it for life. He approached him step by step, looking at him expressionlessly. "With me around, she won't be fine. But it's you who came to me eagerly and asked me, what's on Shin's heart?" Chapter 4. He's really not something. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Quan didn't expect that he would have this attitude towards him. He took the first 2 steps and looked at him with a puzzled expression on his face. "Qingshan, what's wrong with you? Didn't I care about you?" Su Qingshan looked at the person in front of him, and his hatred quickly rose in his heart. In his previous life, he was the same, always pretending to care about him, but in reality, he always thought about how to destroy him. Take him to drink, take him to play cards, tell him there is a quick way to make money, and want to take him along in his previous life. He was extremely foolish. He didn't see his true face clearly and thought he was really doing it for his own good. It wasn't until Lin Mei passed away and his children ignored him that he revealed his true face. He said he had always hated him, he said he was not as good as him anywhere. Why did he have such a beautiful and virtuous wife, and he would never leave him even after he was like that? Why did he have such filial children, even though he kept saying he hated him, he never let him go? He is jealous, he hates, so he wants to ruin him. The hatred made Su Qingshan particularly clear-headed, and his eyes completely turned cold. Don't worry, I've figured it out. After all, I'm different from you. My wife and children still rely on me, so I can't continue to be so careless. Don't call me when you drink or play cards in the future. After speaking, he pulled Su Shan away. Lu Quan looked at their backs, his face turning green and white, and his teeth clenched tightly. He is just showing off that he has a good wife and a pair of children, but why should he sue Qingshan? Lin Mei is a famous beauty and capable person in the village. Who would have thought that she would take a liking to Su Qingshan, a poor person, and be so devoted to him? And he is still single today. He has always been better than Su Qingshan since he was young, and how could he be willing to find someone who is not as good as Lin Mei? But after searching for so many years, he really can't find someone better than her. The more he thought, the more angry he became, and his face twisted for a moment. If someone walked by, he would definitely be startled. At this moment, Su Qingshan and Su Shan had already walked almost to the village entrance. Su Shan was bouncing and jumping all the way, looking extremely happy. Su Qingshan was afraid of him falling and reached out to pull him, only to see him suddenly turn his head and look at him. Dad, is what you just said true? Will you never drink or play cards again? Su Qingshan let out a and saw him jump up with joy. That's great, so Mom no longer has to secretly wipe her tears. Su Qingshan felt a bit uneasy in his heart. Does your mother often cry secretly? Su Shan nodded and said, you are often not at home. Mom is very tired by herself, Grandma often scolds her, and there are people in the village who laugh at her, saying that she has men and no men are no different. She always endures, doesn't want to argue with them, and then comes back to cry secretly alone. Su Qingshan suddenly stopped and slapped himself hard. Su Shan was startled by him and said, Dad, how are you hitting yourself? At this moment, Su Qingshan felt only regret in his heart. He picked him up and touched his head. Xiao Shan, Dad regrets it. I used to be such a bad person and caused you too much injustice. I will definitely make amends. From now on, I will definitely not let you suffer any more injustice. Su Shan reached out and touched his flushed face, half believing and half doubting. Really? Su Qingshan nodded heavily. Su Shan extended his little hand and said, then let's pull the hook. Su Qingshan couldn't imagine how disappointed he was with him before, which led him to confirm time and time again. He reached out his hand, pulled the hook with him, and stamped it. Don't worry, this time, I will definitely keep my promise. Su Shan smiled and hugged his neck. Mom will definitely be very happy. Thinking of Lin Mei, Su Qingshan showed a guilty smile. She has a good personality and is so beautiful. The person who proposed to her house broke the threshold, but she chose him instead. Over the years, he has been so clumsy that she must have been ridiculed countless times for being blind. He exhaled heavily and hugged Su Shan tightly. Let's go home. Su Shan happily turned his head around and looked at the people on the road. He also has a father who is in pain. And at this point, some people also noticed them. Qingshan, why don't you go back? Su Qingshan changed his previous unpredictable mood and humbly replied, "Yes, I just bought something from the town and rushed home to cook dinner." The person smiled and nodded, but as soon as he left, he immediately began to discuss with the people around him. His changes were so significant that everyone couldn't help but wonder if he had been stimulated and his brain had gone bad. Su Qingshan heard their voices of discussion, but he didn't stop, just hurried towards home. Finally, he arrived home before the sun set and looked up to see Lin Mei holding Nian Nian waiting for them at the doorstep. He warmed his heart and then put down his backpack. Lin Mei couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when she saw the things inside. "Why did you buy so many things? Life can't get by anymore." Su Qingshan knows that she cares about money, but money can still be earned. What he cares most about now is her. He took out a head rope from his backpack and wrapped it behind her. His movements were clumsy, almost hurting her scalp. He looked at his young wife in front of him, scratched his head with embarrassment, and then took out a small mirror from the room to give to her. "Xiaoshan picked it for you. Would it look good to you?" Lin Mei looked in the mirror, feeling naturally happy in her heart, but couldn't help but blame him on her mouth. "What are you doing with this money? I'm not without something to tie my hair." Su Qingshan naturally knew that in order to save money, she would tie her hair with the leftover yarn from knitted sweaters when she went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. A woman who was so beautiful and charming before marriage, but now she has become more and more frustrated following him. He is really not something. He placed the other headband on Nian Nian's hand and crouched down to look at her. "This is for recitation, both you and Mom have it." The little girl grinned at him, looking extremely happy, and even gave him a kiss on the face. Su Qingshan knows that children do not hold grudges, but he must always remind himself not to make mistakes again. At this moment, Lin Mei saw the redness and swelling on his face and reached out to grab him. "What's going on? You got into a fight with someone else." Su Shan was standing on the side about to speak when Su Qingshan grabbed him. "It's okay." After speaking, he stood up. "Let's go, help Dad make a fire, let's go boil lard." Su Shan was extremely happy and followed him into the kitchen. Lin Mei wanted to go in and help him, but she was kicked out by him. "Just take your child with you and wait for them to eat." Lin Mei looked at his busy figure, feeling both surprised and delighted in her heart. She couldn't believe that this was her husband, who never left home for 3 days and always came back with a strong smell of alcohol. She bent down and put on the headband for Nian Nian. She lowered her voice, her face filled with visible joy. "Nian Nian, this is what Dad bought. Your dad said he won't drink anymore and will think about our little home. Are you happy?" The little girl nodded with a smile and kept shouting, "Dad." Lin Mei hugged her and looked towards the kitchen with her, feeling uneasy and hopeful. Can their family really become better? Chapter 5. Climbing the Mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Qingshan acted quickly and in no time, he cut all the pork fat and prepared to put it into the pot. Although Su Shan was young, he was already very skilled in making fires. Taking advantage of the gap between adding firewood, he stood up and looked at the meat on the cutting board, drooling unconsciously. Su Qingshan couldn't bear to see his appearance. In the past, he used to drink and play cards, and his already small savings were squandered by him. The house was filled with potatoes and cabbage, and it had been a long time since there was any meat or fish. His 2 children were both pale and skinny, and his wife was as thin as a gust of wind that could blow them away. Thinking about it, he wished he could give himself another slap. At this moment, he heard Su Shan's voice. "Dad, the pot is hot and you can put in the meat now." Su Qingshan finally came to his senses. He put all the pork fat into the pot and patiently waited, occasionally flipping it over. Taking advantage of the waiting gap, he found that there was not much firewood at home, so he planned to go up the mountain tomorrow to pick up some. Their village is located at the foot of the mountain, which is very high. Each household has contracted corresponding land. After the land was opened up, some were used to grow vegetables, some were used to grow fruits, and some were used to grow tea. The mountain spring water is clear and sweet, not only for drinking, but also for watering the land. It can be said that most of the economic source of their village is bestowed by this mountain. At this moment, a fragrance had already permeated the small kitchen. Qingshan flipped through it with a shovel and saw that oil had already come out. He looked at his eager son beside him, picked up a piece of oil residue from the pot and stuffed it into his mouth. Qingshan shouted, "Hot," while carefully chewing. His small face seemed to be laughing like a flower. "How fragrant! I'll fry all the remaining oil residue with chili later, so you can eat enough." When both children are growing up, eating well is the most important thing. Qingshan was extremely happy, perhaps because he had received his promise. He didn't look at him eagerly anymore. After a while, seeing that it was almost cooked, Lin Mei walked in and placed the jar that had previously been filled with oil on the stove. She also found a spoon and handed it to him. Qingshan reached out and took it, then stuffed a piece of oil residue into her mouth as well. Lin Mei was startled by his action and her cheeks turned slightly red. "There is still some leftover lunch. You can heat it up later and then stir-fry some vegetables." Qingshan responded and then watched her hurriedly leave. Qingshan sneaked up to him at this moment and whispered, "Dad, Mom seems to be blushing." Qingshan smiled and then used a spoon to scoop up all the oil residue, and then began filling it with lard. "A jar full of lard, I think we can eat it for a while now." At this point it was already dark outside, so he quickly started frying vegetables. In addition to stir-frying pig oil residue with chili peppers, he also stir-fried another cabbage and heated the rice for a while. When the dishes were all served, Qingshan was the most excited. He looked around the plate of pig oil residue, but never reached out his chopsticks. Qingshan put a few pieces and a chopstick of cabbage into his bowl. "Eat more, and in the future, you will be like your father, tall and tall." Qingshan nodded vigorously, then buried his head and began to eat rice. Qingshan looked at his wife beside him, who had been holding cabbage all along. He knew she was reluctant to give up and wanted to give anything good to the child. But this pig oil residue is not really a good thing. What he will give them in the future will definitely be thousands or hundreds of times better than this. He put a few pieces of oil residue in her bowl and said, "Don't just eat cabbage. Look at how thin you have become." Lin Mei shook her head and then decided to give it to Qingshan. "I don't like it. You can give it to the children." Qingshan stopped her movement and said, "You are the hardest working person in this family, you must eat." Lin Mei couldn't resist him and could only agree. Qingshan looked at her slow movements and felt uneasy in his heart. "Don't worry, I will work hard to make money so that our family can eat meat every day in the future." Lin Mei looked at him with red eyes, her eyes full of emotion. After dinner, Qingshan rushed to wash the dishes. When he returned to the room, the two children were already asleep, while Lin Mei was sewing clothes under the dim yellow light. He walked over and took the needle and thread from her hand. "I'll mend it tomorrow, don't hurt your eyes," he said. In her previous life, she had vision problems by middle age, and later on, she could see less and less. Looking back now, her eyes were not only burnt out, but also crying badly. At this moment, she still reached out to grab it and said, "It's only a few stitches away. Xiaoshan is still wearing it tomorrow." Qingshan took her hand and said, "Don't worry, you've injured your foot now, so rest at home. I'll do all the work in the field." Lin Mei looked at him and suddenly reached out to stroke his cheek. "Does it hurt or not?" Qingshan suddenly remembered that what she was talking about was the slap he gave him. He shook his head and said, "It doesn't hurt." Lin Mei took the safflower oil from the side of the bed and poured a little on her hand, then gently applied it to the swollen area. Qingshan looked at her for a long time, then at a pair of children on the bed not far away, feeling very happy in his heart. After a while, Lin Mei withdrew her hand and carefully closed the medicine oil bottle. "Go to sleep." Su Qingshan responded and casually turned off the light, then lay down beside her. He looked at the ceiling, and at this moment, their family was still squeezed together in a room. Although warm, it was somewhat impoverished. The most important thing for him right now is to make money, but how to make it is a big problem. Thinking of going up the mountain tomorrow, he plans to look around and determine which bamboo and tree are growing well. At this time, every household's furniture was made of wood, making carpentry a popular profession in the countryside. Zhaoshuyuan.com, and he happened to be an apprentice who had studied with his teacher Fu for 5 or 6 years, and his craftsmanship was also good. Now is the time to come in handy. Thinking about it, he fell asleep. The next morning, he was awakened by the sound of a rooster. After waking up, he still couldn't believe it, until he saw his wife and children around him, and truly believed in the fact of his rebirth. He carefully got out of bed and went up the mountain with a firewood knife and a basket. At this moment, when the genius had just started to shine, there were already many women washing clothes by the small river. Seeing him holding a firewood knife, they all asked, "Qingshan, go up the mountain to chop firewood." Su Qingshan responded and then strode up the mountain, ignoring the comments behind him. At this moment, the sun had not yet risen and the dew was a bit heavy. He broke some pine needles and picked up the scattered fallen leaves on the ground, intending to take them back and start a fire. Along the way, he picked up some withered branches and carefully folded them all, putting them in a basket. Going further up, he saw 2 dead trees and cut them down with a wooden knife, intending to drag them home to be used as firewood. After searching for firewood, he continued up and found bamboo and suitable fir and pine trees for furniture on the mountaintop. He looked around and found that although there was no one to take care of them, they all unexpectedly looked very good. He had a plan in his mind and planned to go down the mountain first, so that his family wouldn't be able to see him and he should be anxious. He is tall and has fast steps. It takes over an hour for others to go down the mountain, but he arrived at the foot of the mountain in less than an hour. Watching the sun come out, he was about to put all the firewood in the yard to dry, but suddenly a commotion came from the direction where he didn't feel homesick. "Are you stupid? Why don't you want something that someone else brought to your door? You don't want it, I want it." Chapter 6. Fake Door Visits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He recognized his mother's voice and saw his wife's figure, so he ignored the withered tree in his hand and ran over quickly. At this moment, Lu Quan was standing at his doorstep, with an awkward smile on his face. He walked forward and protected his wife behind him. "What's going on?" He said this while looking at Lu Quan and Su's mother. Lu Quan glanced at the woman behind him and said with a concerned expression, "I didn't just see that my sister-in-law was injured, so I brought something over to take a look." Who knows why she refused to accept it? Coincidentally, my aunt came over, and now. Sure enough, my mother was holding a bottle of canned food and a bag of fruits in her hand. The conditions of Lu Quan's family are much better than his. His father works as an accountant in the village, and he has an older sister above him. Now that he has married, he can be considered spoiled by the whole family. Therefore, at the age of 30, he did not marry a wife. Although his parents complained, they never forced him. Reviving his life, Su Qingshan naturally knew his thoughts. He took a step forward and wanted to take something from his mother's hand. Su's mother quickly took a step back and said, "What are you doing? They brought it with good intentions, why not?" Su Qingshan knew about his mother's temperament and did not explain much to her. "Give the things back to them, we don't want them." Lu Quan's face was a bit uneasy. "Qingshan, do you have any misunderstandings about me? I saw that my sister-in-law was injured, and these things are for her and the children to eat. The implication is that this is for her and the child, and it has nothing to do with him." Unexpectedly, Lin Mei walked up from behind him again. Take it back, we don't want it. Lu Quan looked embarrassed and wanted to persuade him again. Su Qingshan had already snatched something from Su's mother and forced it into his hand. We don't need these things, and our family won't bother you anymore. You can go back. Lu Quan couldn't guess the reason for his sudden change in temperament. He just looked at Su Shan in the distance, bent down, and shook the things in his hand. Xiao Shan, do you want to eat? The boy, who usually greets everything, now shakes his head without hesitation when he sees canned food that may not be eaten once a year. I don't want it, you're the one who messed up my dad. You're a bad person. At this moment, Lin Mei hurriedly wanted to cover his mouth, but Lu Quan had already listened to these words. He looked at Su Qingshan with an injured expression on his face and said, Qingshan, it seems that I was wrong. I just wanted to take you to relax earlier, but I forgot that you are different from me. You have a family, so don't worry, I won't ask you to drink or play cards again in the future. Su Qingshan didn't believe his words at all. His eyes had been fixed on him for a long time, so how could he give up so easily? But the days are still long, he has plenty of time to play with him. He looked at his son beside him and said, Xiao Shan, go and drag back those 2 withered trees on the road. Immediately after, he put down his backpack again, ignoring Lu Quan standing in front of him, and directly poured out the pine needles and dead tree branches inside. Lu Quan quickly took a step back, his face becoming increasingly ugly. It's getting late, so I'll leave first. Su Qingshan didn't lift his head either, no delivery. When he left, Su's mother pointed at him with an angry expression on her face and said, What kind of medicine did this woman give you? How did you become like this? You didn't even listen to me. Su Qingshan looked up at her and said, Mom, Lu Quan used to take me out drinking and playing cards every day. We live a good family like this. Do you still think he's a good person? Su's mother was momentarily speechless, holding back for half a day before finally uttering a sentence. Others are not good, but things are good. How good the canned food and fruits are for her to eat. Su Qingshan's attitude was firm. I don't plan to deal with him again in the future, so I naturally have to distance myself from him. If you take what he has, it's like falling into a conversation, and the root of the trouble is buried. Su's mother was momentarily stunned by what he said, but her heart was still unhappy. I think you're just drinking and being foolish. You listen to your wife and be careful of her. Mom, Lin Mei has been married to me for almost 10 years and has given birth to 2 children for me. Why do you still treat her so disrespectfully? He always found it strange that Lin Mei had a good temper and was capable. How could her mother hate her so much? Su's mother seemed to have been stopped by him, but she immediately looked at Lin Mei angrily again. Look at how you've taught my son. He used to listen to me everything. I shouldn't have agreed to let you enter my house in the first place. Lin Mei was also angered by her repeated humiliations, and coupled with the things she was thinking about, she was still angry and couldn't bear it anymore. I know you don't like me, but since we're separated now, we just need to have less interaction in the future, so you don't have to worry when you look at me. You don't need to wear it when you recite in the future. I'll just tie her to my belt and won't let her leave my sight for another minute. Su's mother was so angry that she let out her breath and turned her head to look at Su Qingshan with a face full of grievances. You see, this is your good wife. She's just so angry with me. Su Qingshan was afraid that she would hurt Lin Mei, so he pulled her aside. Mom, Lin Mei is my wife and the mother of my 2 children. I hope you can treat her better. How could Su's mother listen to him? She was just angry that Lin Mei had taught him bad, but she didn't want him to see her face and continue, if you keep doing this, come back less in the future. This way, you can also have fewer arguments. Su's mother was so angry that she almost fainted. She couldn't figure out why her second son, who used to be so obedient, suddenly changed. It's just that she blamed all of this on Lin Mei. It's all her who taught him bad. She gave her a fierce glance before leaving in a hurry. Su Qingshan looked at his wife who was still standing on the side and grabbed her hand. Zhaozuiyuan.com, don't take it to heart, we just need to live our own lives well. Lin Mei looked at him for a long time and finally nodded. As the sun grew brighter, he sun-dried all the firewood he had carried down from the mountain and then decided to go to the field with a hoe. Lin Mei was about to follow him when she saw the situation, but she was stopped by him. If your injury hasn't healed yet, just rest at home for a day, and I'll be enough alone. At this moment, Su Shan also came out with a small hoe and said, Mom, I'll just follow Dad. You and your sister should be at home. Lin Mei ultimately agreed. Su Qingshan came to the field, turned over a piece of barren land, sowed some cowpea seeds, and went to the river to fetch water and water the land. Their village is located at the foot of the mountain, which may be a bit off-center, but it is very suitable for farming due to its proximity to the mountains and water. After finishing these tasks, it was already noon. He looked at the empty piece on the field ridge and planned to plant fruit trees around. There is no place to sell things in their village, so if you want to buy anything, you have to go to the town, which is not very convenient. It's not easy to have a full meal these days. Fruits are considered luxury, and he grows them himself. Some of the two children don't even have enough to eat, while others can even be taken to the town to sell, which is also a source of income. He said he could do it. He roughly estimated how many saplings he needed and planned to go to the town this afternoon to take a look. After thinking about it, he picked a few carrots and planned to take them back for lunch, while discussing this with his wife. After all, now she is the housekeeper at home, and buying so many saplings also requires a considerable amount of money. Just as he walked onto the road, he saw Su Huigan walking towards him. He walked forward without looking, but was stopped by him. Second brother, I have something to say to you. Chapter 7. Crazy Fury. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Su Qingshan handed the vegetables to Su Shan and asked him to go home first. Then he turned his head to look at Su Huigan, his eyes slightly narrowed. Big brother, what are you going to tell me? Su Qingshan really doesn't like this big brother. From childhood to adulthood, he has always been skilled in competition and snatching, and all the good things in his family are his. Now that he has become a family, he has found a more powerful wife and given birth to two sons. The eldest son is still the eldest grandson of the Su family, and he always claims to be a hero of the Su family. Su Qingshan used to be too lazy to argue with him, but now that he is going to split up, he needs to explain it clearly. Su Huigan frowned as he looked at his second younger brother who looked completely different from before. Qingshan, you can't treat our mother like this. You know how much she has put in for this family. Without her, our brothers wouldn't have grown so big. Now that you have your own family, you can't forget your roots. Su Qingshan couldn't help but sneer at the familiar accusation. Big brother, on the surface, I may not be as skilled as you, but I have been married for so many years and the money is managed by my mother. When there is a harvest in the field, I will send some to her as soon as possible. As for you, since you got married, you haven't taken care of her anymore. Besides giving some money every year for Chinese New Year, what else have you done? Su Huigan's face turned red when he was scolded by him. I've already told you, that's your sister. Law. Big brother, you don't seem to be someone who is afraid of his wife. Su Qingshan looked at him casually and smiled, then said calmly, and both of your children were raised by your mother. A few years ago, Xiaoshan was still young, and every time I wanted my mother to help me take care of them, you had various reasons. Anyway, you just didn't want my mother to help me take care of my family. So, when it comes to that, my mother has paid a lot more for you than me. Why don't you know to give back a little more? Su Huigan never expected that his second younger brother, who used to be unable to hit a fart with a single stick, would now become so eloquent that he couldn't refute every word he said. But he thought of his wife's advice before leaving, that the money in the second family was no longer under his mother's control, and that the situation was so ugly. The third family was not yet married, so she must have pointed everything at their family in the future. Their family of 4 can only just eat enough, how can they afford to have an extra mouth? At this thought, his face darkened. Second, that's not what I said. After all, you are also Mom's son. If you really don't care about her in the future, you will definitely be stabbed in the spine. Qingshan saw that he was in a hurry and still spoke calmly. I didn't say I don't care, but how to manage and care for her needs to be explained clearly in advance. We can't be as vague as before. How about we take some time to discuss with our mother and see how much money and food we each give her each month. This way, she can have a guaranteed life and be fair to us. Su Huigen's face turned green and white at this moment. He couldn't figure out why he had cheated himself on this trip. Qingshan saw that he had not responded for a long time, so he tentatively asked, "It's getting late. I also need to go back for dinner. How about you go back and discuss with sister.in.law, big brother?" Su Huigen glared at him angrily, then turned around and left in a fit of anger. Qingshan didn't take this matter to heart at all. Big brother and sister.in.law are so stingy that they don't want to pay a penny. They still pretend to be good people here and want to treat him like a scapegoat. They have a beautiful idea. He hummed a tune and walked home. When he reached the small path at the doorstep, he found that his chimney had already emitted smoke, indicating that his wife was already cooking lunch. He washed his hands by the small river and returned home. He saw his wife stir-frying carrots, while Su Shan was still burning the fire. He touched his head and said, "You're so good." Su Shan had a flattered and surprised expression on his face, and when he left, he looked at Lin Mei with a joyful expression on his face. "Mom, did Dad just praise me?" Lin Mei smiled and nodded. She looked outside and saw Qingshan sitting on his shoulder, supporting Sun Yan. The little girl was timid and tightly hugged his neck with both hands, but couldn't help but giggle. Her eyes were slightly warm, and she didn't know how long she had been looking forward to such a warm scene. At this moment, she saw a tall man walking towards their house through the window. In no time, she heard Qingshan calling him second brother. She quickly came out of the kitchen and said, "Second brother, the food will be ready soon. Stay and eat together." The man who was called the second brother looked at his 30.5 or 60.6 face, with a dark complexion. When he smiled, people could see his white teeth at a glance. "Okay, I happened to go to town and cut some meat. You made it for the children to eat." Speaking, he took out a piece of meat from behind and handed it to Lin Mei. Lin Mei repeatedly refused, "Second brother, how can we do this? You have already helped our family too much and can't ask for your things anymore." The second brother took a step and placed the things on the kitchen chopping board, with a slightly serious expression. "This is for 2 children. They are growing up, how can they eat without meat?" Qingshan looked at Lin Mei and asked her not to say anything more. At this moment, the second brother hugged Sun Yan and even reached out to touch her forehead. Qingshan noticed something was wrong and said, "Second brother, what happened?" The second brother put Sun Yan down and then took out a piece of candy from his pocket. "Take it to eat." The little girl was extremely happy and quickly ran away with the candy. At this moment, he looked at Qingshan with a serious expression on his face. "I've heard people say that you're not making any mistakes, is that true?" Qingshan looked at the man in front of him, his face full of shame. They grew up together from a young age, and he was a few years older than him. He was the second in the family, and he always called him second brother. In his previous life, he also helped their family a lot, and he warned him several times not to get so close to Lu Quan and to take care of his family more. But he didn't even listen. In the end, he was extremely disappointed with him and cut off contact directly. And in this lifetime, everything is still in time. He nodded and said, "Second brother, don't worry, I've figured it out. I won't make mistakes again in the future. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com." The second brother looked at him for a while and reached out to pat his shoulder. "Just think it through, as long as you stop making mistakes, we'll still be brothers." Su Qingshan was about to respond when he suddenly glanced in the direction of the old house. "There's something I think I should tell you." Su Qingshan lowered his voice when he saw his serious expression. "What's going on?" The second brother stood up and pulled him to the back of the house. "Don't tell Lin Mei about this, I'm afraid she can't bear it." Su Qingshan felt a thump in his heart, realizing that things were not that simple. He nodded and said, "I promise you not to tell her." Seeing no one around, the second brother spoke up. "Yesterday, I came down from the mountain and saw Nian Nian fall into a small river, crying incessantly and her lips turning purple. Your mother was standing not far away at the time, but she didn't even take a glance and left with your nephew Su Hao." At this moment, Su Qingshan felt his anger surge directly above his head, and his volume couldn't be controlled. "Second brother, are what you said true?" The man nodded and said, "I pulled Nian Nian up, then called your mother back and scolded her. She reluctantly took Nian Nian back." At this moment, Su Qingshan understood why he said not to tell Lin Mei. Lin Mei loves her daughter so much that if she finds out, she will definitely go crazy with anger. He couldn't imagine what his mother was thinking when she saw her own granddaughter drowning and freezing to death, and she just took her grandson to play. He was so angry that he couldn't stand steadily for a moment. If it weren't for his second brother's support, he would have almost fallen. That's his daughter, her own granddaughter, she can actually watch helplessly. Chapter 8. If you become prosperous in the future, don't forget that brother too will become you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The second brother saw that he was so angry and believed that he truly cared for Sun Yan. He reached out and patted his shoulder, reminding him, in the future, you two will still take the child with you as a couple. If you are too busy, you can bring it to my house and let my wife take it with you. Nian is young and forgetful, but this kind of thing cannot happen again. If no one sees it next time. At this moment, Su Qingshan's angry face turned pale and his voice became hoarse. Second brother, I understand now. I used to only think that it wasn't easy for my mother to raise me, but now. He is really too cold-hearted. The second brother also sighed upon seeing the situation. What's important now is to earn more money. This family still needs to be supported by you. Su Qingshan nodded and took him back to the front of the house. And as soon as they left, a small and thin figure emerged from behind the tree. He covered his mouth with one hand and his pupils were wide open, clearly frightened. This Su family aunt is so ruthless that she doesn't even care about her granddaughter's life or death. He didn't care if it was time to order food, so he ran towards the village entrance. At this moment, Lin Mei had already prepared the meal, and when she saw them coming back, she asked them to come over and eat quickly. She cut a small piece of meat, stir-fried it with chili peppers, and added a little soy sauce, which was so fragrant. Su Shan was extremely greedy, but he only dared to take one piece and then ate the rice in large gulps. Upon seeing this, Ergu added a few more pieces to his bowl and wanted to give them to Sun Yan. Lin Mei quickly stopped him. Second brother, Nian Nian still can't handle spicy snacks. I made some minced meat for her and mixed it with the rice. Upon hearing this, the second brother felt relieved and said, this girl is well behaved. I like her at first glance, but unfortunately, my family is all kids. I really want such a well-behaved daughter. Lin Mei touched Sun Yan's head upon hearing this and said, did you hear that? Your second uncle praised you. The little girl held bowls in both hands and smiled at them. Seeing her appearance, Qingshan felt even more heartbroken when he thought about what had happened yesterday. But he dared not let Lin Mei see it, so he quickly averted his gaze. He thought of his second brother often going to town, so he asked if he knew where there was a fruit tree seedling seller in town. The second brother turned his head to look at him and said, "What, do you want to sow?" Qingshan nodded and said, "The ridge of the field at my doorstep is all empty. I'm thinking about planting a circle of fruit trees so that if the two children have fruit to eat in the future, they can still sell the excess for money." The second brother smiled at the words and said, "It's hard for you to have this kind of heart. Coincidentally, my dad just bought a batch of fruit seedlings at a low price from someone else and plans to plant them on the vacant land behind my house. You can come back with me and pick a few to plant later." Qingshan quickly thanked Lin Mei upon seeing this, and then gave her a wink. Lin Mei quickly got up and prepared to go inside to get the money. The second brother saw her intention and stopped her. "Just a few fruit seedlings, they are not valuable, and it's not certain whether they will survive." Lin Mei shook her head and said, "No way, you have already helped our family too much. This money must be given to. If you two separate from me so clearly, then I won't be happy." The second brother pulled his face down, startling them all. Upon seeing this, Qingshan grabbed his wife and asked her to sit down again. "Second brother, we must plant it well. When the fruit comes out, we will send it to you to taste as soon as possible." The man then smiled and said, "Is that right? We are all brothers who grew up together. What are we doing so clearly?" After dinner, Lin Mei went to wash the dishes, Qingshan followed his second brother to his house to pick up saplings, and Shan stayed at home to play with his sister. When he arrived at his second brother's house, he waved his hand and asked Qingshan to pick it himself. Qingshan was also embarrassed to ask for more, so he only took one plant from each and had to leave. Seeing this, his second brother stuffed a lot into his basket. Qingshan refused, and the second brother comforted him by saying, "The second brother has no other requirements. If you become prosperous in the future, don't forget the second brother." Qingshan nodded forcefully. They were not biological brothers, but he treated him and his family with great kindness. He carried the sapling on his back and quickly arrived at the ridge of his own field. He shouted at home and asked Shan to help him bring the hoe. Shan in the yard heard it and immediately came over with something. Seeing the saplings in the basket, he couldn't help but be curious. "Dad, what kind of saplings are these?" Qingshan's movements were quick, and in no time, he dug the pit and arranged the saplings one by one. "These are all pear trees, these are apricot trees, and the rest are orange trees." As he spoke, he quickly planted the saplings and then took him back. "The weather is good today, and Qingshan plans to go up the mountain to chop some bamboo and try weaving some bamboo baskets. He hasn't done it for many years, fearing that his skills may be unfamiliar." He had just returned home when he saw Lin Mei carrying a cloth bag on her body and Sun Yan, who was sleeping soundly, about to go out. He stopped her and said, "Where are you going?" Lin Mei saw them coming back and smiled, "I'll go up the mountain to pick tea. Taking advantage of the good weather today, I'll go pick more, and the tea prices will be good before Qingming festival." Qingshan looked down at her leg and quickly said, "My leg is fine, it doesn't hurt anymore." Qingshan knew that she always remembered this home, and even if she was forced to stay at home, she would still sneak out without any dissuasion. "Coincidentally, Shan and I are also going up the mountain. Let's go together." Lin Mei was a little curious, "What are you going up the mountain for?" Qingshan reached out and took Sun Yan over. "I'll go chop some bamboo and come back, weave some bamboo baskets to try my hand, and see if my previous skills are still there." Lin Mei looked up at him with bright eyes. "You must be here, where can you not be? You used to be the best carpenter in our 10-mile 8 countryside. My younger brother also became an apprentice back then, and his teachers and masters said he was not as good as you." He came back angry for several days, saying that one day he would surpass you. Su Qingshan felt a bit embarrassed when she praised him. Is there anything else like this? Lin Mei nodded and said, be careful when you go up the mountain, don't fall. Su Qingshan nodded, grabbed his machete, and reached out to close the door. They had just arrived on the road when someone stopped them. Is the whole family going up the mountain? Lin Mei smiled at her and said, yes, auntie. Over the years, Su Qingshan has been drinking and playing cards without staying at home or managing the house, and she rarely smiles anymore. Now seeing her smile, the villagers feel strange, but their hearts are also happy for her. When they walked away, voices of discussion came from behind. I don't know if Qingshan has really improved completely this time, but Lin Mei has not been easy these years. Yeah, yes. Su Qingshan vaguely heard something and looked at his wife, who still had a smile on her face. Su Qingshan knew that she had chosen to trust him again. He must never let such a good woman down again. Chapter 9. My wife is really amazing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, in no time, the tea mountain arrived. Su Qingshan followed Lin Mei to her own tea field and saw her find a piece of land with her old cotton jacket spread on it. Then he took Sun Yan from his arms and placed her on it. The little girl has already woken up now and is very happy to see her family around. Lin Mei squatted down at this moment and said, Nian Nian, you can play here by yourself. Mom is going to pick tea, Dad and brother are going to chop bamboo. Are you obedient and obedient? Do you know? The little girl nodded obediently, indicating that she knew. Su Qingshan touched her head and took Su Shan to the other side of the mountain. Su Shan jogged along with his steps, but couldn't help but be curious. Dad, I heard from the villagers that there are wild boars on the mountain. Is that true? Su Qingshan smiled and said, are you afraid of wild chickens and rabbits? Bamboo and pine trees don't actually grow at the highest point, they just have no way up there. He had actually heard the roar of wild boars coming from the mountains before, and some people in the village had also seen them. They said they looked at the weight of 200 or 300 pounds, with infinite strength, and were afraid that several men could not suppress it. As a result, there are many people who are tempted, but none of them dare to really try, and they are afraid that their lives will be entrusted to this mountain. Upon hearing his words, Su Qingshan suddenly felt that perhaps he could give it a try. Even if it's not easy to catch a wild boar, it's still good to get a wild chicken and a wild rabbit to cook meat for your family. But the prerequisite is to dig the road first and then work on the mechanism, which is not an easy task. He plans to discuss with his second brother in a few days. Su Shan was pulling at his sleeve at this moment, clearly feeling a bit scared. Su Qingshan patted his thin and weak shoulder and said, it's okay, Dad is here, no one can hurt us Xiaoshan. Su Shan looked up at him, as if he was about to be moved and cry. Su Qingshan reached out and touched his head. A man, there's no one who can't move to shed tears. Hold it back, he said. Su Shan took a sniff and didn't cry anymore. The two of them were chatting and laughing, and finally arrived at the bamboo forest. He looked at them one by one, and finally chose a few emerald green and sturdy ones before preparing to start chopping them. Xiaoshan, please stay away and be careful not to get hit. Upon hearing this, Su Shan quickly ran to the distance. Su Qingshan picked up a firewood knife and with a few clangs, a bamboo tree fell. His movements were fast, and in no time he chopped down 7 or 8 bamboo trees. He put them together and then took out hemp rope from his pocket, intending to tie them together and drag them down the mountain. However, these bamboo trees combined were too thick and the hemp rope was not long enough. He tried several times but all ended in failure. At this moment, Su Shan walked up and said, Dad, let me drag the largest tree down the mountain. Su Qingshan looked at him and said, is this bamboo very heavy? Can you handle it? Although Qingshan is young, he still needs to be strong. He crouched down, picked up the bamboo, and then dragged the front end out. Upon seeing this, Qingshan quickly tied up the rest and followed him. Qingshan is clever. When encountering a steep mountain road, he threw the bamboo down directly, and then he followed suit quickly. For a while, Qingshan couldn't keep up with him at all. He rushed slowly and finally arrived at the foot of the mountain. He saw that he and the bamboo had already appeared at the doorstep together, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, the ants by the small river saw him and praised Qingshan for his understanding and ability. Qingshan appears humble on the surface, but he is also genuinely happy in his heart. Yeah, Qingshan has always been very sensible and obedient. After returning home, he immediately went to deal with the bamboo. Qingshan helped him back and forth, helping him with tools and pouring water for him to drink. Qingshan wiped the sweat off his head, took off his coat, and put it aside. You go to Tea Mountain and bring your sister back, otherwise your mother won't be able to concentrate on her work. Qingshan quickly responded and then ran towards the Tea Mountain. Qingshan buried his head and continued to work. He had never forgotten the skills he had learned before. Although he was a bit unfamiliar with them now, he quickly got started. In no time, Qingshan returned with Sun Yan. Qingshan asked him to take his sister back to the room to play, while he continued to bake the bamboo over slow fire. When all the moisture in it had dried, he used a spatula to cut the sawn bamboo into even and thin strips, then shaved and scraped it off, and finally soaked it all in cold water. He gathered all the chopped bamboo stems and leaves together, ready to use them as firewood when they were dried in the sun. In fact, in rural areas, parents often use bamboo stems to beat their children, but their two children are both sensible and obedient, so they are completely useless. As evening approached, he took a spoon and bucket and went to water all the fruit seedlings planted in the afternoon. Just as he was about to turn around and come back, he saw Lin Mei coming back. She had a smile on her face, indicating that she had gained a lot this afternoon. He stood still and waited for her to approach before walking forward. So happy, how much did you pick this afternoon? Lin Mei smiled with a curved pair of eyes and said, I picked 1 pound and 4 taels this afternoon and earned 84 cents. Qingshan reached out to take her cloth bag and smiled, my wife is really amazing. Lin Mei felt a bit embarrassed when he praised her, and her cheeks turned slightly red. When she arrived at the doorstep, she was somewhat shocked. Did you really go chop bamboo? Can I still deceive you? If I say I want to do it, then I definitely have to do it. We can't rely solely on you as a woman, and I have to earn money, right? Lin Mei looked at him for a long time and nodded. At this moment, Sun Yan somehow dug out the apple he had bought before and stumbled towards them. Qingshan leaned down and said, do you want to eat an apple? The little girl looked at him and smiled. Zhaozuiyuan.com Qingshan was about to take it for her to wash, but Lin Mei took the lead and walked into the kitchen. In no time, she came out, holding a few sliced apples in her hand, giving them to Nian Yan and Qingshan respectively, and then handing him another one. Qingshan waved his hand and said, let the children eat, I'll. Before he could say anything, Lin Mei stuffed it directly into his mouth, while she ate the smallest remaining piece. A small apple, but let the whole family taste its crispy sweetness. Although life is hard, everyone's face is smiling. At this moment, a sudden cluck sound came from behind the house, and Qingshan ran over quickly. In no time, his surprised voice came over. Mom, Xiaohua laid 2 eggs. Xiaohua is the name he gave to the hen at home. Speaking of which, this chicken was sent by Lin Mei's mother a few years ago. Lin Mei's mother gave birth to 3 daughters and a son. Lin Mei was the third in line, with her parents and sisters doting on her and her younger brother supporting her. Before getting married, she had a very good life. Back then, although her mother was not satisfied with her choice of Su Qingshan, she couldn't resist her and still let her marry. Over the years, Su Qingshan has been in trouble. She scolded them verbally, but she also helped them a lot. Thinking of this, Su Qingshan wanted to appear more personal. He wanted his mother-in-law to know that Lin Mei had chosen him correctly. At this moment, Su Shan had already run over with hot eggs. Su Qingshan saw that there were still chicken feathers and chicken droppings on it, but without exception, they were all very happy. Xiaohua doesn't lay eggs every day, this is a rare opportunity for her family to cook meat. He reached out to take it, with a smile on his face. Dad will make you stir-fried eggs with leeks tonight. Chapter 10. Things Better Than Eggs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Su Qingshan had just entered the kitchen with an egg when he heard the joyful voice of Su Shan's lowered voice coming from outside. Mom, I really like my dad now. Can you help me tell him not to change back? Su Qingshan stopped moving, looking forward to his wife's answer. Don't worry, your father really figured it out this time. Su Qingshan silently smiled bitterly. He had died once before, and for him, being with his family well together was the most precious thing. He quickly processed the chives, then washed them several times with clean water, and then washed the eggs with the remaining water. Su Shan rushed in again at this moment and said, Dad, I'll help you set fire. He is really obedient. At his age, he runs wildly in the village every day, but he helps behind him every day. And because he lacks nutrition, he is also thinner and smaller than his peers. Su Qingshan believes that the most important thing for him at the moment is to supplement nutrition for his family and help them take good care of their bodies. He remembered when he was an apprentice before, every time he went to his master's house, he would climb over a mountain. The mountain was not very high, and behind it was a river where schools of fish and shrimp could often be seen. It's not easy to have a full meal these days, and having big fish and meat is even a top luxury. When people see the fish and shrimp in the river, they seem to be shining brightly, so the fish and shrimp in the village creek have long been cleaned up. That place is remote, perhaps not yet discovered, Su Qingshan thought. He didn't tell his family, fearing it would be a joyous occasion, and planned to come over early tomorrow morning to have a look. At this point, Su Shan had already cooked the fire. He used a bamboo pot brush to sweep out the remaining water in the pot, and then put down a small piece of lard. When the lard melted, he put down the eggs. The eggs burst into a fragrant aroma as soon as they were cooked, and Su Shan stood by the stove, unable to resist swallowing water. Dad, the eggs are so fragrant. Su Qingshan flipped the egg with a shovel at this moment, then put down the leeks and slowly stir-fried them, not forgetting to look up at him. Then you can discuss with Xiaohua and ask if it can lay 2 eggs for us to eat every day. Su Shan's eyes lit up and he was truly moved by his words. I'm going now. Su Qingshan couldn't help but laugh as he watched his back run away, and at that moment, Lin Mei walked in. You know how to tease children. Su Qingshan scratched his head awkwardly and then looked at her leg. Are your legs any better? The woman sat down by the stove and added another stick to it. It's already fine. Su Qingshan had already cooked the dishes, and then heated up the leftover chili peppers and stir-fried meat for lunch. After heating up, he poured down the remaining rice and stir-fried it. In any case, a drop of oil or soup should not be wasted. When the dishes were all served, Su Shan returned with a dejected expression on his face. Dad, Xiaohua ignored me and even pooped at me. Su Qingshan couldn't help but laugh and walked over to him, touching his head. It's okay, besides eggs, Dad has better things for you to eat. Su Shan's eyes lit up immediately and he said, what kind of thing? Su Qingshan returned to his position and said, keep it a secret for now, but as long as you know, Dad won't deceive you. Su Shan was overjoyed, nodded quickly, and then began to nibble at the rice. Dad, today's rice is really delicious. Qingshan smiled and put another piece of egg in his bowl. If it smells good, eat more, he said after dinner. Lin Mei sat at the door sewing Su Shan's backpack while it was still dark. Su Shan was constantly swaying around her, obviously looking forward to going to school. Qingshan looked at their backs and thought that elementary school was in town. If he only relied on one pair of legs, it would take more than an hour just to go to and from school every day. Now it seems that the top priority is to buy a bicycle before Su Shan starts school, so that it will be convenient for them to go to town in the future. And now, there are only over 5 months left until he starts school. He didn't say anything, just watched as it turned completely dark and asked them to return to their room early to rest. Lin Mei said, "It's the last stitch," but Qingshan didn't mean to stop as he watched her sew one stitch after another. He was about to grab the needle from her hand when he saw her finally stop and bite off the remaining thread with his mouth. "Alright, it's sewn up." Su Shan quickly reached out and took it, looking at it again and again with love. "I'm going to sleep with it tonight." After speaking, he was about to run into the room, and Qingshan pulled him back. "Wash your hands and face before going to bed." Su Shan walked up to the wash basin rack and didn't care about using a towel. He reached out to grab a splash of water, casually wiped his face, and then rubbed his hands in the basin before running quickly into the room. "I'm done washing it." Qingshan looked at the dark water in the enamel basin and shook his head with a smile. He went to fetch clean water, washed himself briefly, and then called out to his wife beside him. "You can also come and wash it." Lin Mei nodded, put down the needle and thread on her hand, and then wet the towel, carefully wiping her cheeks and neck. Qingshan looked at his wife in front of him. She was still young, with good skin and big and bright eyes, as if she could speak. He remembered that he had been captivated by her eyes at the time, and then pursued her like a madman. Zhaozhuiyuan.com. Thinking of that past, he felt very emotional and just stared at her blankly for a long time. After washing up, Lin Mei turned around and saw him staring straight at her. She was also startled and her face turned slightly red. "Why are you looking at me like this?" Qingshan took the towel from her hand, hung it on the shelf, and then pulled her into the room. "My wife looks good, I love watching." Lin Mei gave him a somewhat embarrassed push and said, "What nonsense." "No nonsense, it's all my sincere words." Live again, Qingshan doesn't care too much about being reserved, he just wants to stay by his wife and children's side, and his family will always be together. Returning to the room, Su Shan was still awake, tightly holding the backpack that Lin Mei had made for him with both hands. Seeing them come in, he quickly sat up from the bed. "Dad, on the day I start school, will you, Mom, and Sister take me to school together?" Qingshan couldn't bear to refuse his obedient son in front of him. "Okay, I promise you, go to bed quickly." At this moment, Lin Mei glanced at Sun Yan, who was already asleep, and helped her pull up the blanket before returning to their bed. A bed and 2 blankets, which also shows how bad their previous relationship was. Qingshan just didn't see it. After all, he had done so many damn things in the past, how could he make up for it overnight? That night, Qingshan could sense that his wife had looked at him several times, but she didn't speak, and he didn't take the initiative to ask questions. He knew that she always had a grudge in her heart and couldn't fully trust him. He is not in a hurry, he will show her his actions and determination.